The winter has arrived in Komi's world with more excitement and happiness. Shouko Komi, commonly called Komi, wakes up in the morning and finds her friend Najimi's message reminding her to bring the notebook she asked for earlier. Komi gets ready and goes to school, where Najimi gently grazes Komi's cheeks with her cold hands and runs away. As Hitohito Tadano arrives there, Komi similarly grazes his cheeks with her cold hands, which makes her happy. Later, when Komi meets Najimi, she gives her the notebook, and Najimi gives Komi a comic friends book in return, on which Komi's friends will write their names. Komi meets her friends and asks one by one to write their names on it. One day, a new student named Makoto Katai joins the school in the winter because he got ill and could not join the school earlier. However, his personality is no different from Komi, and he looks like a hardline thug, which scares all students. Katai enters the class, but with his unintentional first impression, all students get scared and gather to protect Komi. However, he tries to communicate with Komi, thinking she is a famous student, but fails to talk. Watching this, Tadano realizes the situation and accompanies him around the school. However, Katai becomes fan of Komi for being the master of communication. Later, the final exams have arrived, and all students are present in the examination hall to take the exam. During the exam, Komi only brought 2 wooden pencils, one of it fails and others nib breaks. However, Komi can't communicate, so Tadano helps her in the situation. The following day, because of a huge thunderstorm, all the students are said to stay safe inside their houses. Komi is happy to have a day off but always gets scared of bad weather. When the power goes out, she gets sacred even more until Tadano calls her and calms her down. The following day, Yamai is distressed because she wants to see Komi's panties badly. As it was raining earlier and a giant puddle was created on the schoolyard, Yamai asks Komi to play outside so she can view her panties through a specular reflection. She tries to watch through the reflection, but Najimi running around Komi cannot let it happen. Then she tries to capture her photo, but the mud interferes with her photo. However, when she fails multiple times, she has to comfort herself with Komi's beauty. Some boys from Komi's class sit together and think about how they would have a romantic date with their class girls. They discuss many girls in the class, but they cannot imagine any scenario involving Komi. However, Tadano sitting beside them thinks about a date with Komi and gets embarrassed. Later, Komi and her friends play the I love you game, in which you lose if you crack up from the word. Yamei and Najimi fail after many attempts, but when it is Tadano's turn, he gets embarrassed and gets interrupted to say so. However, Komi wanted him to say something. Nakanaka watches Tadano that he can understand Komi very easily as he is reading her mind. She asks him to teach how he understands Komi that well. Yamei suddenly arrives there and joins them in learning Komi's language. However, they guess it wrong all the time, but Tadano guides them properly. Later, the class boys start their second edition of dating class girls, as they have finally imagined a scenario involving Komi, but as a protective assassin. However, they dismiss the session as Komi enters the class. Later that night, when Komi goes outside to buy roasted potatoes, she encounters Tadano there and gives him 1 potato. Tadano thanks him and asks her to hang out during the winter break. The winter break has finally started with Christmas Eve, but Komi has no plans until she suddenly receives a call from Najimi telling her that all their friends are coming to her place for a Christmas party. Knowing that her friends are coming, Komi gets impatient and waits outside the house. As her friends arrive, they wish her Merry Christmas and mistakenly wish her a happy birthday, but her birthday is tomorrow. They all plan to sit next to Komi and wait for Komi's move, but Komi's mother calls her for help. Later, Komi returns and sits with Tadano, making all others jealous. After that, they play the king game and enjoy their Christmas day. There is a flashback of 24 December at noon, when Tadano suddenly realizes that Komi's birthday will be on 25 December. He calls Najimi and goes to buy gifts for Komi with the whole class. Later, they decide to buy a large cat doll together for Komi, which she loves so much. However, she is unable to thank them at that time. But after they leave her house, she texts her thanking them for celebrating her birthday. One day, Komi wakes up and finds Najimi and Tadano outside her house, waiting for her to play in the snow. Watching them, Komi instantly gets ready and walks outside the home. Najimi tells her that she was awake at 3 in the morning and meets Tadano at 5 to play outside. Najimi keeps playing with Komi, while Tadano makes a small snowman on the house's wall. Najimi, watching this, decides to make a huge snowman with Komi. After making the snowman, Komi's mother asks them to take their soups. Tadano and Najimi go to take the soup while Komi make another small snowman placed beside Tadano's snowman. Later, Komi and his family visit Shuko's mother, Yuko's house, where Komi meets her cousin named Akira and starts having fun with her. Later, when Akira starts teaching Komi the game of Hanafuda, their grandmother suddenly arrives and challenges Akira to a match. Akira eventually loses to Yuko, but Komi is able to beat her in the game. The following day, Tadano wakes up late in the morning and walks to the kitchen only to find Najimi there, who stayed playing games until midnight. Najimi plans to visit the first shrine of the year with Tadano and all other classmates. Najimi invites everyone, including Komi, Nakanaka, Agari, Tadano, Otori, Katai, and some other group members. As they all arrive there, they instantly rush inside the shrine, leaving Tadano and Komi behind. Tadano and Komi visit around the shrine and later draw the fortune slips, where Komi appears to have a great luck. Later one day, Tadano gets extremely ill due to a high fever and cold, but he tells his family that they can go to enjoy the hot springs, leaving them behind. However, his fever gets worse than he thought, causing him to cry on his situation. Thinking he will die of fever, he gets no other option but to call Najimi. However, instead of calling Najimi, he accidentally calls Komi and requests her to come to his place. Suddenly realizing that he has called Komi, Tadano apologizes to her and then calls Najimi. However, much of a surprise for him, when he watches Komi at his door, Komi gives him ginger soup and later makes food for him. After eating the food, Tadano feels better and falls asleep. Watching Tadano asleep, Komi tries to hold his hand, but suddenly when Najimi arrives, Komi instantly raises her hand. Later that night in her home, Komi is anxious about the recent incident in Tadano's house and thinks Najimi must have seen her when holding Tadano's hand. Komi tries to write a letter to Najimi to prevent any misunderstanding, but cannot decide her words. The following day, she goes to school, and while taking her shoes, Najimi suddenly arrives and instantly takes Komi's letter and escapes. On the other hand, Tadano suddenly arrives and meets Komi, which makes her embarrassed. There is a flashback. Some hours earlier, Tadano cannot remember whether Komi came to his house or not, so he decides to ask Najimi about it. Najimi tells him that she was checking his pulse, but for Komi, her misunderstandings only deepened. Later, the school trip is announced, and the groups for the school trip will be selected tomorrow. Everyone is excited except for Komi, who appears to be lost in her thoughts. After school, Komi talks with Tadano and reveals that she does not want to go on trip because when she was in middle school, she was always excluded from trip groups. Tadano tells her that she has real friends, which makes her feel better, and she gets ready to go on the trip. Komi and her class board on the bullet train and start their trip to Kyoto. As the students are divided into groups, Yamai, Agari, and Nakanaka are placed in one group, while Chirai, Shinobino, and Sonoda form a group, and Katai forms a group with Shizuto, Naruse, and Tadano. As for Komi, she is grouped with Kato and Sasaki. As the class arrives in Kyoto, they are welcomed by their tour guide, Tenju and Ryuko, on the bus. The students are taken to the various sites of Kyoto, but most of the students are interested in watching Komi's beauty rather than the locations. Later, the class arrives at their hotel for a night. After dinner, the teacher allows the students to take a bath for 30 minutes. Hearing this, Yamai is ready to take a bath with Komi, or specifically to touch her body. However, Komi feels embarrassed to be naked and enters the bath with a towel around her body. On the other hand, the boys are busy taking their photos while flexing their bodies. Afterwards, Komi and the other girls enjoy the pillow fight until the teacher arrives and forces them to sleep. However, Komi struggles to sleep. On the second trip day, Sasaki and Kato reach out to Komi and ask her to hang out with them. As Komi agrees to their request, Kato suddenly pulls out the whole day's schedule. As their day starts, the group rushes to Utopia Street, Japan. Arriving there, they enjoy a Spider-Man 3D ride, eat takoyaki, visit Tadaija, and barely return to Kyoto. After that, Komi participates in a street performance while dressed as a Mako. Watching Komi surrounded by dangerous guys, Sasaki suddenly wears a Hanya mask to conceal their presence, and then she shows them her yo-yo moves and forces the guys to run away. Later that night, Kato realizes that the Hanya masked person is Sasaki, but Sasaki keeps refusing until Komi thanks Sasaki for saving her. Afterwards, as the group is about to sleep, Sasaki and Kato start their love talk segment in which Kato tells Sasaki that she somewhat likes Katai. On the other hand, when they force Komi to reveal her crush, she writes the alphabet H, which may represent Hitohito Tadano. The following day, while returning home, Komi sleeps on the train. Sasaki and Kato calls Tadano and force him to sleep with Komi. However, when she wakes up and finds that she was asleep on Tadano's shoulder, she gets embarrassed. The day before Valentine, Onamine asks Komi what she is going to make for tomorrow. But when Komi replies that she has not decided yet, Onamine invites Komi to her place to make something for tomorrow. Hearing this, Kid also gets ready to join them. However, Onamine apologizes to Tadano that he cannot join them, which embarrasses him. At Onamine's house, Komi meets her naughty siblings and then makes a chocolate cake with the help of others. Valentine's Day has finally arrived. As Tadano enters the school, he checks his shoe locker more carefully than before but finds nothing. Later in the class, first Najimi gives chocolate to Komi, to which Komi gives her homemade chocolate in return. After that, everyone gives chocolate to Komi, and she gives homemade chocolate in return, except Tadano, because no one gives him a single chocolate. However, Tadano receives chocolate from Katai after school. Knowing that he did not receive any chocolate from any girl, Tadano is very depressed until he meets Komi outside his house. He thinks that Komi will give him a chocolate, but she was there to give him a form sent by Najimi. However, as she is about to return home, she gives Tadano best chocolate she has made, which make Tadano happy. The following day, when Komi enters the school, Onmin thanks her for the chocolate she gave. Later, Najimi and Nakanaka also thank her for the chocolate. However, when she enters the class and watches Tadano, she gets embarrassed and starts staring at her. Tadano cannot understand the situation, but when he tells Komi that her chocolate was amazing, Komi blushes and runs away. Later, Komi carefully watches Katu while she reads Shoji's problems, but is unwilling to confront her. Seeing Komi, Katu offers her to solve one of the problems. However, when Tadano enters the class, she offers Tadano to solve the problem and leave them alone. But Komi and Tadano quarrel for the first time over the problem until Najimi arrives and makes them realize that they are not supposed to fight over a small matter. March has arrived, leaving winters behind. Tadano plans to give Komi a special gift on White Day, but he is unable to decide on the gift. With no other choice, Tadano has to take his sister Hitomi's advice. But the interesting part is that Hitomi thinks that Tadano plans to give the gift to the boy who gave him the chocolate. She asks him whether he likes the person he will give the gift to. Tadano becomes embarrassed but replies that he does like the person because he will be giving it to Komi. Hitomi decides that she will bring him an amazing gift. On White Day, Tadano could not give the gift to Komi at school, so he decides to give her personally at her house. As Tadano arrives at her house, he encounters Komi's mother, who tells him that Komi is not at home and takes him to Komi's room to make him wait for Komi. Later, when Komi arrives, Tadano gives him a cream as a gift, which makes her very happy. Later at the school, Komi and Tadano discuss their upcoming second year on how they spent their recent year making some good friends, but Najimi interrupts their conversation. However, Komi and Tadano wish for another successful year on their first day as second-year students. That's the end of the video. Hope you enjoyed it.